At Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter-in-law left a card on the table. Family trip clean the house before we're back. Even the nanny went along. I simply smiled. When they returned and their keys didn't work in the door, my daughter-in-law fainted. This is how I reclaimed what was rightfully mine. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I should have known something was wrong when I woke up that Thanksgiving morning with a knot in my stomach. At 65, I've learned to trust my instincts, and they were screaming at me that day. But I pushed the feeling aside and got up to start preparing the feast, just as I had done for the past 43 years in this house. My name is Eleanor Adams. This two-story colonial on Maple Street has been my home since Thomas and I bought it as newlyweds. We'd saved every penny, worked overtime, and finally signed those mortgage papers with such pride. Thomas would stand in the backyard on Sunday mornings, coffee in hand, looking at our little kingdom with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from building something with your own hands. This house will always protect our family, Ellie, he used to say. Long after we're gone, it'll still be standing strong. Thomas has been gone for 25 years now. Cancer took him fast, too fast. But I kept his promise. I raised our son Michael in this house, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat after Thomas died. I was a secretary by day and waitress at night, while somehow still making it to Michael's baseball games and parent-teacher conferences. Those were hard years, but I never missed a mortgage payment, not one. When the last payment was made 15 years ago, I used every penny of Thomas's life insurance to wipe out that debt. I wanted Michael to inherit a home free and clear someday. No burdens, no debts, just memories and love baked into every floorboard. I run my hand along the kitchen counter as I pull out ingredients for the stuffing. This kitchen has seen 3 generations of Thanksgiving dinners. The recipe box on the shelf contains my mother's handwriting, my additions, and even a few notes from Michael when he was learning to cook as a teenager. "Mom, you're up early." Michael's voice startles me from my reminiscing. He stands in the doorway. At 42, still handsome like his father, though stress has carved lines around his eyes that weren't there a few years ago. His software company has been successful, but success comes with its own price tag. Turkey won't cook itself. I smile, wiping my hands on my apron. Did you sleep well? Well enough. Whitney's already up too. She wants to set the table herself today. I try to hide my surprise. In the 12 years since Michael married Whitney, she has never once offered to help with holiday preparations. Usually, she sleeps in until mid-morning, then spends hours getting ready while I handle everything else. That's thoughtful of her, I manage. Michael shifts uncomfortably. She said something about wanting things to look a certain way for the photos. Of course, the photos for her social media. Whitney's Instagram account is filled with perfectly staged family moments that bear little resemblance to our actual lives. In these curated images, we're always color-coordinated, smiling, and gathered around elaborate tablescapes that Whitney orders but never helps create. I'll focus on the food then, I say, turning back to my preparations. Michael hesitates in the doorway. There's something he wants to say. I can tell. After raising him alone, I know every expression that crosses his face. Mom, Whitney's parents are coming this year. This is news to me. Oh, when was this decided? Last week. I thought she told you. She hadn't, just like she hadn't told me when she redecorated the living room while I was visiting my sister last spring, or when she enrolled Emma in a different school without consulting me, even though I was the one who picked her up 3 days a week, or when she hired a landscaper to remove the rose bushes Thomas and I had planted our first year in the house. It'll be nice to see them. I lie. Whitney's parents. Gerald and Patricia Montgomery, have never hidden their disdain for me or this house, which they consider beneath their daughter's station. And Uncle Robert and Aunt Jean, Michael adds. The house will be full then, I say, mentally calculating how to stretch the food. I wish I'd known sooner. Michael has the grace to look embarrassed. Sorry, Mom, you know how Whitney gets with planning things. I do know. Whitney plans everything except the actual work required to execute those plans. That's always left to me. As Michael leaves, I hear Whitney's voice from the dining room, instructing our grandchildren, Emma and Jake, on how to arrange the good china my mother's Wedgwood that survived 2 moves and 4 decades. No, Emma, the dessert fork goes on this side. Whitney's voice carries that syrupy sweetness she uses when she's performing for an audience. Grandma Eleanor never sets the table properly. I grip the edge of the counter, breathing deeply. The disrespect stings, but I've grown accustomed to swallowing these small humiliations. For Michael's sake, for the grandchildren. Emma, at 10, is already showing signs of her father's kind heart and my love of books. Jake, at 7, has Thomas's curious mind and mechanical aptitude. They are the lights of my life, the reason I endure Whitney's subtle cruelties and Michael's blind eye to them. Through the kitchen doorway, I can see Whitney moving around my dining room in her cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Her blonde hair is pulled back in a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place. She's beautiful in that polished, untouchable way that always makes me aware of my aging hands and sensible clothes. The cranberry sauce looks anemic, she comments as she passes the kitchen. Did you follow the recipe I sent you? I used my mother's recipe. I reply. The same recipe I've used every Thanksgiving since Michael was born. Whitney makes a small, disapproving noise. Well, the color won't photograph well. Maybe we can enhance it with some food coloring. Before I can respond, she's already moved on. Her attention captured by the centerpiece, she's arranging an elaborate creation of pumpkins and exotic flowers delivered from a boutique florist this morning. It replaced the simple arrangement of autumn leaves and candles I'd put together yesterday. As I return to basting the turkey, I catch my reflection in the window above the sink. At 65, my face shows the map of my life laugh lines around my eyes from genuine joy, worry lines on my forehead from raising a son alone, strength in the set of my jaw that comes from overcoming widowhood at 40. My silver hair is cut in a practical bob, and today I'm wearing a dress I've had for several years still good, still serviceable, like me. Whitney has made it clear over the years that she finds me embarrassingly outdated, too stuck in the past, too unwilling to improve myself with the cosmetic procedures she's already started at 39, too content with a house that doesn't showcase their success. Grandma Eleanor! Jake's voice breaks through my thoughts as he barrels into the kitchen, narrowly missing the hot oven. Mom says you need to use the fancy glasses, not the regular ones. I smile at my grandson, his energy a welcome interruption. Does she now? And what do you think, Jake? Are fancy glasses better? He scrunches his nose, considering the question seriously. I like the blue ones you always use. They don't break when I drop them. I laugh and ruffle his hair. Smart boy, but today we'll use the crystal to make your mom happy. Why does Mom always want things different from how you do them? He asks with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. Out of the mouths of babes, I kneel down to his level, mindful of my arthritic knee. Sometimes, sweetheart, people have different ideas about what makes a home special. Your mom likes things to look a certain way. I care more about how things feel. Your way feels better, he whispers conspiratorially. I hug him close. breathing in the scent of childhood apple shampoo and the faint trace of maple syrup from breakfast. Thank you for saying that. Now, would you like to help me with the sweet potato casserole, your dad's favorite? Jake nods enthusiastically, and for a few precious minutes, I have this small connection, this passing of traditions from one generation to the next. It's these moments I live for now, the quiet continuity of family that Whitney can't stage or control, no matter how hard she tries. By noon, the house fills with the mingled aromas of roasting turkey, simmering gravy, and baking pies. The kitchen is warm and fragrant, just as it should be on Thanksgiving. Despite Whitney's interference, I've managed to prepare all the traditional dishes that make this holiday special. The doorbell rings, and I hear Michael greeting his aunt and uncle. Robert is Thomas's younger brother, the only connection to my husband's family that remains. He's always been kind to me, defending me when others suggested Michael and I should sell the house and move somewhere more suitable after Thomas died. As I wipe my hands to go greet them, Whitney sweeps past me toward the door. I'll handle the guests. Eleanor, you focus on the food. And just like that, I'm relegated to the kitchen, the help rather than the hostess in my own home. By 4 o'clock, everyone has arrived and gathered in the living room. Michael and Whitney, Emma and Jake, Uncle Robert and Aunt Jean, and Whitney's parents, Gerald and Patricia Montgomery. The Montgomerys sit stiffly on my sofa, looking around with barely disguised disapproval. Patricia keeps running her finger along the coffee table, checking for dust, while Gerald makes loud comments about the quaint charm of older homes. Of course, our place in Boca has just been completely renovated, Patricia announces to no one in particular. Italian marble throughout. One simply can't put a price on quality. I bite my tongue as I set out a tray of appetizers. One could indeed put a price on quality, and the Montgomerys never tire of doing exactly that. Dinner's ready, I announce, and there's a general movement toward the dining room. The table does look beautiful, I'll give Whitney that. The china gleams, the crystal sparkles, and her elaborate centerpiece adds a magazine-worthy touch. But it doesn't feel like my Thanksgiving table. It feels like a set designed for a photo shoot, which, I realize as Whitney pulls out her phone, is exactly what it is. Everyone, gather around for a quick family photo before we sit, she directs, positioning people like chess pieces. Eleanor, maybe you could just take the picture for us. The exclusion is deliberate and pointed. I'm not part of the family portrait. I'm the photographer, the outsider looking in. I can take it, Uncle Robert offers, noticing my hurt expression. Eleanor should be in the family photo. Whitney's smile tightens almost imperceptibly. Oh, but Mom knows exactly how I like the framing done. Next time, maybe. There's an uncomfortable silence that Michael breaks by suggesting everyone take their seats. I notice he doesn't challenge Whitney's decision to exclude me from the photo. I take my usual place, the seat closest to the kitchen door, so I can easily fetch forgotten items or refill dishes. It's been my spot for years, though I can't exactly remember when it became my designated position when I shifted from head of the table to perpetual server. Michael sits at the head of the table, a position that once belonged to Thomas, then to me for the many years I ran this household alone. Whitney is at his right hand, perfectly poised in her cashmere sweater, her makeup flawless despite the hours of preparation, or rather, my hours of preparation. Before we say grace, Whitney announces, her voice carrying that theatrical quality she uses when she wants to be the center of attention. I have a little surprise for everyone. She reaches under her chair and pulls out an envelope, cream-colored to match her sweater. Her fingers are perfectly manicured, a fresh French manicure that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a week. It's a family announcement, she continues, her smile growing wider. Michael and I have been planning something very special. My heart skips. Are they expecting another baby? Moving closer. The possibilities race through my mind as she opens the envelope with deliberate slowness. She pulls out a expensive cardstock with elegant lettering and holds it up for everyone to see, but she's looking directly at me as she reads it aloud. Family vacation to Aruba, 10 days of sun, sand, and relaxation. We leave tomorrow morning and we'll be back December 5th. The table erupts in excitement. Emma and Jake cheer. Uncle Robert congratulates Michael on the generous gesture. The Montgomerys beam with pride at their daughter's good fortune. But Whitney isn't finished. She reaches into the envelope again and pulls out another card. This one smaller. Her eyes never leave mine as she slides it across the table toward me. And this one is for you, Eleanor. My hands tremble slightly as I pick up the card. The silence around the table is deafening as I read the words printed in that same elegant script. House-sitting duties, deep clean all rooms, organize closets, tend to plants. Expected completion by December 5th. Thank you for your service. The words swim in front of my eyes. Service, like I'm hired help, like I'm the maid, not the woman who raised the man sitting at the head of the table, not the grandmother of the children who are now looking at me with confusion. I don't understand, I whisper, my voice barely audible. Whitney's smile turns predatory. Well, someone needs to take care of the house while we're gone. You don't mind, do you? I mean, you practically live here anyway. And it's not like you have anywhere else to be. The casual cruelty of her words hits me like a physical blow. Uncle Robert shifts uncomfortably in his seat. Patricia looks down at her plate. Even Michael seems stunned, though he says nothing to defend me. Even the babysitter is coming with us, Whitney continues, her voice light and cheerful, as if she were discussing the weather. Sarah is so excited to have the chance to travel. It'll be like one big happy family vacation. One big happy family without me. I look around the table at the faces I've known and loved for years. Some avoid my eyes. Others look genuinely uncomfortable, but no one speaks up. No one says this is wrong. No one points out that I'm being treated like hired help in my own home. Grandma Eleanor, Emma's small voice cuts through the silence. Aren't you coming with us? Whitney answers before I can. Oh, sweetie, Grandma Eleanor is too old for vacation. She'd much rather stay here and take care of the house. Wouldn't you, Eleanor? The question hangs in the air like a challenge. I can feel everyone waiting for my response, waiting to see if I would make a scene, if I would ruin their perfect Thanksgiving dinner. I force my lips into what I hope resembles a smile. Of course, I manage to say. I'll take good care of everything. But inside, something fundamental has broken. As the conversation moves on to vacation plans and travel arrangements, I sit there holding that card, reading those words over and over again. Thank you for your service. 43 years in this house, 43 years of sacrifice, of putting my family first, of swallowing my pride and my dreams to make sure they had everything they needed. And this is how I am repaid with a house-sitting assignment while they parade off to paradise with the babysitter. The rest of the dinner passes in a blur. I smile when expected, nod at appropriate moments, and clear dishes like the good little servant they apparently think I am. But something has awakened inside me, something that has been sleeping for far too long. As the family says their goodbyes and makes their final vacation preparations, I retreat to the kitchen to clean up. The card lies on the counter where I've left it, those elegant words mocking me in the overhead light. Thank you for your service. I read aloud to the empty room. The words taste bitter on my tongue, but as I stand there surrounded by dirty dishes and the remnants of a feast I'd prepared but barely enjoyed, a thought occurs to me, a thought that should have scared me, but instead fills me with something I haven't felt in years. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The house feels different the morning after they left. Not peaceful, I'd expected that, but hollow, like an abandoned theater where the last performance had ended badly. I stand in the kitchen, still in my robe, staring at the coffee maker as it gurgles to life. The sound seems impossibly loud in the silence. They'd left at 5 in the morning, bags stuffed into Michael's SUV like they were fleeing a crime scene. I'd watched from my bedroom window as Whitney supervised the loading, pointing and directing while Michael did the heavy lifting. Even little Jake had his own rolling suitcase, bright blue with superhero stickers. Whitney had knocked on my door before they left, not waiting for permission to enter. She'd stood in my doorway in her perfectly coordinated travel outfit, designer sunglasses perched on top of her head, even though the sun hadn't risen yet. "Remember, I want the house spotless when we get back," she'd said, consulting a list on her phone. The master bedroom needs deep cleaning, and those guest room closets are a disaster. "Oh, and the baseboards in the living room are dusty. I noticed yesterday." I'd nodded from my bed, pulling the covers up to my chin like a child hiding from monsters. She'd looked around my room then, taking in the modest furniture, the faded family photos on my dresser, the stack of library books on my nightstand. Her expression had been one of distaste, as if my very existence offended her. "Try to make yourself useful," she'd added before leaving. "It's the least you can do." Now, hours later, I sit at the kitchen table with my coffee, that insulting card still lying where I'd left it. "Thank you for your service." The words have kept me awake most of the night, echoing in my head like a broken record. I'd raised Michael in this kitchen, fed him breakfast every morning before school, helped him with homework at this very table, celebrated his victories, and comforted him through his defeats. When he'd brought Whitney home for the first time 12 years ago, I'd welcomed her with open arms, so grateful that my son had found love. How naive I'd been. The changes had been gradual at first, subtle suggestions that maybe I was doing too much for Michael, that maybe he needed space to grow into his role as a husband. Then came the comments about my cooking, my clothes, my opinions always delivered with a smile, always framed as concern for my well-being. "Eleanor, you work so hard," she'd say. "Maybe you should let Michael and me handle the holiday planning this year." "Eleanor, that dress is so vintage. Have you thought about updating your wardrobe?" "Eleanor, I think you might have misremembered that story. Michael told me it happened differently." Slowly, steadily, she'd erased me from my own family. And Michael, sweet Michael, who'd once defended me against playground bullies, had stood by and let it happen. I get up to refill my coffee and catch sight of myself in the kitchen window's reflection. 65 years old, gray hair that needs cutting, wearing a robe I've owned for a decade. When had I become so invisible? The morning drags on. I try to read, but the words swim on the page. I turn on the television, but every channel seems to be showing happy families enjoying perfect lives. Finally, I find myself standing in the hallway outside Michael's old bedroom, the one Whitney has converted into her personal closet and makeup room. The door is slightly ajar, and I can see her designer shoes lined up like soldiers, her handbags displayed on custom shelving like museum pieces. Everything expensive, everything perfect, everything purchased with money from the business. Michael runs the business I'd helped him start with my life savings. But it's the master bedroom that really gets to me. Their bedroom, in the house that has been my sanctuary for 4 decades. Whitney had redecorated it last year, gotten rid of all the furniture that held memories of my life with Thomas, the bed where I'd read bedtime stories to Michael, the dresser where I'd kept family photos, The rocking chair where I'd nursed him through childhood illnesses all gone, replaced with stark modern pieces that look like they belong in a hotel. I sit on the edge of their bed, running my hands over the silk comforter that probably costs more than my monthly Social Security check. This had been mine once. This whole house had been mine, was still mine, technically, though somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that fact. That's when I see it, lying on Whitney's nightstand, her jewelry box, opened carelessly, with pearls and diamonds spilling out like she has so much wealth she can't be bothered to organize it properly. Next to it sits a stack of mail bills and statements that Michael handles, but Whitney likes to review. I shouldn't look. I know that. But something compels me to pick up the top envelope, already opened. It's a mortgage statement for the house. My house. The house my husband had bought 43 years ago. The house he'd left to me when he died. The house I'd never transferred out of my name, despite Michael's various requests over the years. My hands shake as I read the details. They've been making payments on a mortgage that doesn't exist for the past 5 years. Michael has been sending monthly payments to a bank account that Whitney has set up, thinking he was paying the mortgage on the house. But the house has been paid off for 15 years. I'd used every penny of Thomas's life insurance to eliminate that debt, determined that my son would inherit a home free and clear. The realization hits me like a physical blow. Whitney has been stealing from her own husband, convincing him that they needed to make mortgage payments on a house that belongs to me. And Michael, trusting and naive, has never questioned it. I sink into the chair by their bedroom window, the mortgage statement clutched in my trembling hands. Below me, the garden I've tended for decades stretches out in the afternoon sun. The rose bushes I planted when Michael was small, the ones Whitney hadn't yet managed to remove. The herb garden where I taught him to identify basil and oregano. The old oak tree where we'd hung his tire swing. All of it mine. Every brick, every board, every memory embedded in these walls mine. I think about that card downstairs. Those dismissive words that had cut so deep. Thank you for your service. As if I were the help. As if I were some distant relative who should be grateful for scraps of attention. But I'm not the help. I'm the owner. I walk to my bedroom and pull out the old filing cabinet I keep in the back of my closet. Inside, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves, are all the important documents of my life marriage certificate, death certificate, insurance papers, and yes, the deed to the house. My name in black ink, clear as day. Eleanor May Adams, sole owner. I sit on my bed, holding that deed like a talisman. When had I become so afraid of my own family that I forgot who I was? When had I started accepting crumbs when the whole feast belonged to me? The phone rings, startling me from my thoughts. I glance at the caller ID and see Whitney's number. For a moment, I consider letting it go to voicemail, but old habits die hard. Hello? Eleanor! Whitney's voice is bright with artificial cheer, loud enough that I can hear tropical music and children's laughter in the background. Just calling to check in. How's the cleaning going? I look around my modest bedroom, unchanged for decades while they've transformed the rest of my house to suit their tastes. It's going fine? Good. I hope you're being thorough. I left a more detailed list on the kitchen counter. Did you find it? I hadn't even looked. Yes, I found it. Wonderful. Oh, and Eleanor, Michael wanted me to remind you to water his golf clubs. They're in the garage, and the leather needs conditioning in this weather. Water his golf clubs. In December. In a garage. The request is so absurd, I almost laugh. Almost. Of course, I say instead. Great. We're having such a wonderful time. The kids are at the beach with Sarah right now, and Michael and I are about to have couples massages. It's exactly what we needed, a break from all the stress at home. The stress at home, meaning me. I'm glad you're enjoying yourselves. I manage. We are. Okay, I need to run. My massage appointment is in 5 minutes. Make sure you get those baseboards. Eleanor, they were really quite dusty. The line goes dead. I sit there holding the phone, staring at the deed in my other hand. 43 years of memories in this house. 43 years of love and sacrifice and putting everyone else's needs before my own. And this is what it has earned me orders to clean baseboards and water golf clubs while they live it up in paradise. But as I sit there in the growing darkness of my bedroom, something shifts inside me. Something that has been dormant for too long, buried under years of making myself smaller and smaller to accommodate other people's comfort. I stand up, smooth down my robe, and walk to the kitchen. Whitney's detailed cleaning list sits on the counter, 3 pages long, written in her perfect handwriting, room-by-room instructions, down to scrubbing behind the toilets and organizing the spice rack alphabetically. I pick up the list, read it once more, then walk to the fireplace in the living room. The fire I'd lit that morning is still burning low, just glowing embers now. I hold the papers above the flames and let them go. Whitney's perfect handwriting curls and blackens and turns to ash. I feel something I haven't experienced in years. Not anger. Anger is exhausting and useless. Not hurt. I've carried enough hurt to last several lifetimes. What I feel is clarity. They think they're coming home to a clean house and a grateful servant. They're wrong on both counts. I call Harold Peterson first thing Monday morning. Harold has been our family lawyer for 28 years, handling everything from Thomas's will to Michael's business incorporation papers. His secretary, Mrs. Chen, recognizes my voice immediately. Eleanor, how lovely to hear from you. Harold's with a client, but I know he'll want to talk with you. Can you hold for just a moment? While I wait, I stare out the kitchen window at the garden. The morning frost has settled on the rose bushes, making everything look crystalline and new. It feels symbolic somehow, like the world is being reborn right before my eyes. Eleanor. A Harold's warm voice comes through the phone. What a pleasant surprise. How are you, dear? I'm well, Harold. I need to ask you something important about the house. Of course. What's on your mind? I take a deep breath. If I wanted to change the locks on my property, legally speaking, what would I need to do? There's a pause. Well, as the property owner, you have every right to change locks, install security systems, whatever you feel is necessary. Is everything all right? Has there been a break-in? No break-in, I assure him, but I want to make sure I understand my rights. Michael and his family have been living here, but the deed is still in my name, correct? Absolutely. We discussed transferring it several times over the years, but you never signed the papers. The property remains entirely yours. He pauses again. Eleanor, is something wrong? I can hear the concern in his voice. Harold has known me since Michael was in high school. He'd seen me struggle through Thomas's illness, watched me work multiple jobs to keep us afloat, witnessed my quiet strength through decades of challenges. Nothing's wrong, I say, and for the first time in years, I mean it. I'm just reclaiming what's mine. I see. Harold is quiet for a moment. Would you like me to prepare any documentation? Perhaps a formal notice of changes in living arrangements? That would be helpful. How quickly could you have something ready? I could have papers drawn up by tomorrow afternoon, but Eleanor, are you sure about this? I know how much your family means to you. I look around the kitchen at the cabinet doors Whitney has complained are outdated. At the countertops, she's said need replacing. At the breakfast nook, where she humiliated me just days ago. My family means everything to me, Harold. That's exactly why I'm doing this. After hanging up with Harold, I drive to town for the first time in months. I've gotten into the habit of staying home, of making myself smaller and smaller to avoid Whitney's criticisms about my appearance, my choices, my very existence. But today feels different. My first stop is Miller's Hardware, where old Pete Miller has been selling locks and keys for 40 years. He looks up from his newspaper when I walk in, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. Eleanor Adams, haven't seen you in a dog's age. How have you been? I've been better, Pete, but I'm working on that. I explain what I need, and Pete doesn't ask questions. He just nods and pulls out his sample book of lock sets, explaining the differences between standard locks and deadbolts, between basic security and high-end protection. This one here, he says, pointing to a brass deadbolt system. This is what I'd put on my own house. Solid construction, pick resistant, and it comes with 5 keys so you can control who has access. 5 keys? I think about that as Pete rings up my purchase. 5 keys for 5 people I trust. Not 5 people I'm obligated to trust, but 5 people who have earned it. My next stop is even more liberating. Branson's consignment shop has been on Main Street for decades, run by Martha Branson, a woman my age who'd built her business from nothing after her divorce 30 years ago. She looks up from sorting through a rack of winter coats when I walk in. Eleanor Adams, as I live and breathe, what brings you to my little corner of capitalism? I laugh, actually laugh, for the first time in weeks. I need to sell some furniture. Martha, quite a bit of it, actually. Well, you've come to the right place. What kind of pieces are we talking about? I pull out my phone and show her the photos I'd taken that morning. Whitney's precious living room set, the one she'd insisted on buying last year, despite my protests about the cost. The formal dining room furniture that no one ever uses except for company, because Whitney says the kitchen table is too casual for proper meals. The guest bedroom set that stays perpetually pristine because Whitney discourages visitors. Martha whistles low. This is high-end stuff. Eleanor, where did you get furniture like this? It was purchased for my house, but I've decided it doesn't suit me anymore. Martha's eyes sharpen. She's been in business long enough to read between the lines. And she's probably heard the town gossip about how Whitney treats me. Small towns have few secrets. I can give you good money for pieces like this, she says carefully. But are you sure some of these look practically new? I'm sure. How quickly could you arrange pickup? For furniture this nice, I can have my boys there tomorrow morning if that works for you. That afternoon, I drive to every furniture store within 50 miles, looking for pieces that speak to me. Not to some idealized version of what a proper house should look like, but to me, the woman who'd raised a son in this house, who'd tended gardens and cooked countless meals and created a home with her own hands and heart. I find a comfortable sectional sofa in soft blue fabric, the kind you can curl up on with a book without worrying about wrinkles. I buy a dining table made of reclaimed wood, scarred and imperfect and beautiful, with chairs that look like they belong in a farmhouse kitchen. I select a bedroom set that is sturdy and simple. Nothing fancy, but mine. The delivery trucks start arriving Wednesday morning. Out goes Whitney's sterile perfection, and in comes furniture that invites you to sit, to stay, to be comfortable. I rearrange everything, putting my favorite reading chair by the window where the morning light is best, setting up the kitchen table so I can watch the birds at the feeder while I eat breakfast. But the most satisfying moment comes when I hang my photographs back up, the ones Whitney had deemed too personal for common areas. The ones she'd banished to my bedroom to make room for her abstract art that means nothing to anyone. Pictures of Michael as a baby, of Thomas and me on our wedding day, of 3 generations of family holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday afternoons that had meant everything. Each photo goes back in its rightful place, reclaiming the walls of my house with memories of my life. Mrs. Patterson from next door comes by Thursday afternoon with a casserole and curious eyes. I saw all the delivery trucks, she says, craning her neck to see into the living room. Spring cleaning in December, something like that. Something like that, I say, accepting the casserole with genuine gratitude. Mrs. Patterson has been bringing me food for months, ever since she noticed how thin I'd gotten. She's never said anything directly, but her kindness hasn't gone unnoticed. It looks lovely, she says, and I can hear the approval in her voice. Very you. Yes, I think as I close the door behind her. Very me. That evening, I sit in my new living room with a cup of tea and the latest mystery novel from the library. The house feels different now, lighter somehow. The furniture invites relaxation instead of demanding perfection. The photos on the walls tell stories instead of trying to impress visitors. The very air seems easier to breathe. My phone buzzes with a text from Whitney, just a photo of the family on the beach. Everyone tanned and smiling, with the caption, "Wish you were here," followed by a laughing emoji. But I don't wish I was there. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be. I delete the message without responding and return to my book. Tomorrow, Harold will deliver the papers. Tomorrow, the new reality will begin. But tonight, I'm home. Really, truly home in a way I haven't been for years. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the windows and shaking the bare branches of the oak tree. A storm is coming. I can feel it in the air, but I'm not afraid. My house is solid, built to weather whatever comes its way. Just like me. I settle deeper into my new sofa, pull the soft throw blanket over my legs, and smile. Let the storm come. I'm ready for it. I heard the car doors slamming at 10:37 on Sunday morning from my position at the kitchen table, where I sat reading the newspaper with my second cup of coffee. I could see Michael's SUV in the driveway through the window. They were back from paradise, tanned and rested, and probably expecting to find their house sparkling clean and their live-in servant grateful for their return. The front door handle rattled, then rattled again, more forcefully. "That's weird," I heard Michael say, his voice muffled through the door. "My key's not working." "Try it again?" Whitney's voice was sharp with irritation. "Maybe you're using the wrong one." More rattling, the sound of keys jingling, of someone trying multiple keys in rapid succession. "None of them are working," Michael said, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. "It's like the lock's been changed." "That's impossible," Whitney snapped. "Who would change our locks?" There was silence for a moment, then the sound of footsteps on the porch coming around toward the kitchen door. I stayed seated, calmly turning the page of the newspaper, though my heart was beating faster now. This was it, the moment of truth. The kitchen door handle turned, also locked, of course. "Mom," Michael called, knocking on the door. "Mom, are you in there? The locks aren't working." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the taste. Good coffee, the expensive kind I'd always wanted to try, but had never bought because Whitney complained about unnecessary expenses. I'd purchased it yesterday along with fresh cream and real maple syrup for my pancakes, small luxuries that added up to a new way of living. "Mom," the knocking was more insistent now. "Mom, can you hear me?" I folded the newspaper carefully and walked to the kitchen door. Through the glass panel, I could see them all crowded on the small porch, Michael looking bewildered, Whitney looking furious, the children confused and tired from their long flight, and Sarah, the babysitter, standing awkwardly to one side with her overnight bag. I unlocked the door and opened it just wide enough to see them clearly. "Hello," I said pleasantly. "How was your trip?" "Mom, thank God." Michael stepped forward. Something's wrong with the locks. None of our keys work. He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening as he looked past me into the kitchen. What happened to the furniture? I glanced back casually as if seeing the room for the first time. Oh, that I redecorated. You what? Whitney pushed past Michael, trying to get a better view. Where's my dining set? Where are my chairs? I sold them, I said simply. They didn't suit me. Whitney's face went white, then red, then a mottled purple color I'd never seen before. You sold my furniture. You can't do that. That was expensive. It was purchased for my house, I corrected gently. So, technically, it was mine to sell. Grandma Eleanor, Emma's small voice cut through the tension. Can we come in? I need to use the bathroom. I looked down at my granddaughter, sweet Emma with her sun-streaked hair and confused eyes. She was innocent in all this, just a child caught in an adult mess. Of course, sweetheart, I said, stepping aside to let her in. You know where it is. As Emma scurried past me, Jake started to follow, but Whitney grabbed his arm. No, she said firmly. We all go in together. I raised an eyebrow. Actually, you don't all go in together. This is my house, and I decide who comes in. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't yet exploded. Michael stared at me with his mouth slightly open. Sarah shifted nervously from foot to foot. Even little Jake seemed to sense that something monumental was happening. But it was Whitney's reaction that was the most dramatic. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, rage, and then something that looked almost like panic. Your house, she laughed, but it was a brittle, hysterical sound. This is our house. We live here. We pay the mortgage. I tilted my head thoughtfully. Actually, you don't pay the mortgage. There is no mortgage. This house was paid off 15 years ago. Michael frowned. That's not possible. I write a check every month to a bank account your wife set up. I finished for him. Harold Peterson explained it all to me when I had him research the mortgage payments. Quite creative, actually. You've been paying rent to live in my house, except the money's been going into your wife's private account instead of to me. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Michael's mind working, processing what I'd just said, trying to make sense of it. Whitney, meanwhile, looked like she might be sick. That's not, she started, then stopped. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said calmly. I understand that you've been stealing from your own husband while treating me like hired help in my own home. I understand that you convinced my son to pay for a mortgage that doesn't exist while you humiliated me at my own table. Michael was staring at Whitney now, and she was staring at the ground. The pieces were falling into place for him, and I could see the moment when he understood the full scope of what had been happening. Whitney, he said quietly, is this true? She looked up at him, her eyes wide and desperate. Michael, you don't understand. I was trying to help. I was saving the money for us, for our future. You were stealing, he said flatly. From me? From my mother. I wasn't stealing. Whitney's voice rose to a near shriek. I was protecting our interests. Your mother doesn't need this house. She's old. She should be in a retirement home anyway. We're young. We have children. We deserve— She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd just said. But it was too late. The words were out there, hanging in the air like toxic smoke. Michael looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. We deserve what, Whitney? To steal from my mother, to treat her like a servant in her own home. That's not what That's exactly what you meant. His voice was cold now, colder than I'd ever heard it. You thought you could push her out, take over her house, and she'd just, disappear. Whitney's composure cracked completely. She spun toward me, her face twisted with fury. "This is your fault. You turned him against me. You're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see other people happy." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had made my life miserable for 12 years, who had systematically tried to erase me from my own family. And I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no satisfaction, just a deep, abiding peace. "I didn't turn him against you, Whitney," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." That's when she fainted. It happened so suddenly that no one was prepared for it. One moment she was standing there screaming at me, and the next she was crumpling to the porch floor like a marionette with cut strings. Sarah gasped and stepped back. Jake started crying. Michael just stood there staring down at his unconscious wife. "Well," I said, stepping back into my kitchen, "I suppose you'd better call an ambulance." But Michael wasn't looking at Whitney anymore. He was looking at me, and his eyes were full of something I hadn't seen in years. Respect. "Mom," he said softly. "I'm so sorry." I nodded acknowledgement but didn't respond. Sorry was a start, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. "Can we talk?" he asked. "After we deal with this situation." I looked at him, my son, the little boy I'd raised with such hope and love, who had grown into a man who'd allowed his wife to abuse his mother for years. He looked smaller now, diminished somehow, as if the revelation of Whitney's deception had physically shrunk him. "We can talk," I said finally. "But not today. Today, you need to figure out where you're going to stay." His face fell. "Mom, please, we don't have anywhere else to go." "You have money," I pointed out. "All that money Whitney's been stealing from you. I'm sure she can afford a hotel until you sort things out." Michael opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He looked down at his wife, who was starting to stir on the porch floor, then back at me. "The children," he said quietly. "What about Emma and Jake?" I felt my resolve waver for just a moment. My grandchildren, innocent in all this, didn't deserve to be punished for their parents' mistakes, but I also couldn't allow them to be used as emotional leverage the way they'd been used to manipulate me for years. "The children can visit," I said carefully. "When you're ready to have a real conversation about respect and boundaries, but not today." Emma appeared beside me, having finished in the bathroom. She looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes. "Grandma Eleanor, why is Mommy sleeping on the porch?" I knelt down to her level, smoothing her hair back from her face. "Your mommy just got a little overwhelmed. Sweetheart, she'll be fine." "Are we not living here anymore?" she asked, and I could hear the fear in her small voice. I chose my words carefully. "Your house arrangements are going to change, honey, but that doesn't mean I love you any less. You'll always be my granddaughter, no matter where you live." She hugged me then, fierce and tight, and I held her close, breathing in her little girl's scent of sunshine and bubble gum. When I looked up, I saw Michael watching us with tears in his eyes. By the time the paramedics arrived, Whitney was conscious but hysterical. She kept insisting that I'd drugged her, that I'd somehow orchestrated the whole thing, that this was all part of some elaborate revenge plot. The paramedics, professional and kind, suggested she might be suffering from exhaustion and stress. "Vacation can be overwhelming," one of them said gently. "Sometimes the transition back to reality is harder than we expect." As they loaded Whitney into the ambulance for observation, she grabbed Michael's hand. "Don't let her do this to us," she pleaded. "Fight for our family. Fight for our home." Michael looked at her with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This isn't our home, Whitney," he said quietly. It never was. That was the moment I knew things had truly changed. Not because I'd taken back my house, not because I'd revealed Whitney's deception, but because my son had finally opened his eyes. As the ambulance pulled away and the family climbed back into their SUV to follow it to the hospital, I stood on my porch watching them go. The autumn air was crisp and clean, and for the first time in years, I could breathe freely. Mrs. Patterson appeared at her fence, obviously having watched the whole drama unfold. "Everything all right over there? Eleanor," she called. I looked at my house, my beautiful reclaimed house with its comfortable furniture and family photos, and the smell of good coffee lingering in the kitchen. I thought about the morning ahead, quiet and peaceful, with no one to please but myself. "Everything's perfect," I called back, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I meant it. 3 days passed before Michael came to see me alone. 3 days of silence that I filled with simple pleasures I'd forgotten existed. I read entire books without interruption, cooked meals I actually wanted to eat, and slept through the night without the low-level anxiety that had become my constant companion. On Wednesday evening, just as I was settling down with a cup of tea and the evening news, I heard his car in the driveway. This time there was no rattling of keys, no angry voices, just a gentle knock on my front door. When I opened it, Michael stood there looking like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult conversations. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he paused in the doorway to take in the changes, the comfortable furniture, the family photos back on their walls, the general sense of a home that belonged to someone who actually lived there rather than someone trying to impress visitors. "It looks good," he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like relief. "It looks like home." I gestured toward the sofa. "Sit down, I'll make coffee." As I moved around the kitchen, I could feel him watching me. The silence between us wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of two people who needed to find their way back to each other across a chasm that had been years in the making. "How's Whitney?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. Michael sighed deeply. "She's not handling this well." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "The doctor says it's a severe stress reaction, but between you and me, I think it's more than that. I think she's realizing that everything she thought she had control over is slipping away." I brought him his coffee, made the way he'd liked it since he was a teenager, 2 sugars, a splash of cream. The fact that I still remembered seemed to surprise him. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "The Hampton Inn on Route 9. It's not ideal with the kids, but it's temporary." He paused, staring into his coffee cup. "At least I hope it's temporary." I settled into my reading chair across from him. "That depends on what temporary means to you." He looked up at me then, and I saw the boy he used to be underneath the exhausted man he'd become. "Mom, I need you to know how sorry I am, not just about the house or the money, but about everything, about how I let her treat you, about how I stood by and watched you disappear from your own life. Why did you?" The question had been burning in me for years. "Why did you let it happen?" Michael was quiet for a long time, working his jaw the way he used to when he was a child, trying to figure out how to explain something difficult. "At first, I thought she was just particular. You know, she had opinions about how things should be done, and I figured that was normal for newlyweds. Everyone has to adjust." He set his coffee cup down with shaking hands. "Then it became about keeping the peace. Every time I stood up for you, we'd have these terrible fights. She'd cry, tell me I was choosing my mother over my wife, make me feel guilty for not supporting her. I knew that pattern. The tears, the guilt, the way abusers turn their victims into accomplices. And then," Michael continued, his voice getting quieter. I started believing her. She was so confident, so sure of herself. When she said you were too involved in our lives, when she said you needed to learn boundaries, when she said you were holding me back from growing up, I started thinking maybe she was right. The admission hung between us like a confession in church. She made me feel like loving you was a weakness, he said, and his voice cracked on the words. Like being close to my mother was something to be ashamed of. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition of finally hearing my son acknowledge what I'd known but couldn't prove for so many years. The money, I said carefully. How long has that been going on? Michael laughed bitterly. 5 years? 5 years of me writing checks for a mortgage that didn't exist. And I never questioned it. She handled all the finances, said it was easier that way. I was so busy with work, so tired when I came home. I just trusted her. What will you do now? He looked around the room again at the photos of his childhood, at the comfortable furniture that invited relaxation instead of demanding perfection. I don't know. I've been thinking about that for 3 days straight, and I honestly don't know. What do you want to do? The question seemed to surprise him. What do I want? Yes, not what you should do, not what's expected of you, not what will cause the least conflict. What do you want? He was quiet again, thinking. Outside, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's dog barking at something in the yard, the normal sounds of a neighborhood settling into evening. I want my kids to know their grandmother, he said finally. Really know her, not just see her on holidays when their mother remembers to be polite. I want them to learn to cook from you the way I did. I want Emma to hear your stories about when I was little, and I want Jake to help you in the garden next spring. He paused, looking directly at me. And I want to remember who I was before I spent 12 years trying to be someone else's version of a good husband. What about Whitney? The question I'd been avoiding, the one that would determine everything else. Michael stared at his hands. She's threatening to take the kids if I don't fight you on the house. Says she'll prove you're an unfit grandmother, that you're too old to be around children unsupervised. His voice hardened. She's also threatening to claim I abused her, that the stress of living with you drove her to steal the money as some kind of survival mechanism. I felt a chill run through me. Do you think she'll follow through? I think Whitney will do whatever she has to do to get what she wants. And what she wants is this house, your money, and complete control over the family narrative. He looked up at me with something that might have been resolve. But I'm not going to let her have any of those things. The simple statement carried more weight than a dozen apologies. What does that mean, practically speaking? I asked. It means I'm filing for divorce. It means I'm going to fight for custody of my children, and I'm going to make sure they know the truth about what happened here. It means I'm going to pay back every penny she stole, with interest, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows that this house belongs to you and always has. I studied his face, looking for signs that he was just telling me what I wanted to hear. But what I saw was determination, the same stubborn streak that had gotten him through childhood challenges and helped him build his business. That won't be easy, I said. No, it won't. She's already started calling my business associates, telling them I've had some kind of breakdown. She's been on social media painting herself as the victim of elder abuse, claiming you've manipulated me into turning against her. He managed a weak smile. But you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm tired of living in fear of what she might do or say. I thought about what it meant to stand up to someone who had controlled your life for so long, about how terrifying it was to step into that unknown space where the rules were no longer clear. I knew because I'd just done it myself. Do you know something about Whitney that you might not have wanted to see before? I asked carefully, Michael's expression changed, a shadow crossing his face. She had a difficult childhood. Her parents looked perfect on the outside, but behind closed doors. He shook his head. Her father controlled everything: the money, the decisions, even what clothes they wore. Her mother just went along with it, became this empty shell of a person. Whitney swore she'd never be like that, never be powerless. So, instead, she became the controller. I said softly. I think she saw my kindness as weakness, just like she saw your generosity as something to exploit. And he looked down at his hands again. I should have seen it sooner, should have protected you. We both should have made different choices, I said. But we can't change the past. We can only decide what to do next. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping our coffee and processing everything that had been said. Finally, Michael spoke again. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. I nodded. Do you think you can forgive me? Not right away. I know I don't deserve that. But eventually, do you think we can find our way back to each other? I looked at my son, this man who had hurt me so deeply, but who was finally trying to make it right. I thought about the years of small humiliations, the slow erosion of my place in his life, the way I'd been made to feel like an intruder in my own family. But I also thought about the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who brought me dandelions from the yard like they were roses, who told everyone at school that his mom was the smartest person in the world. You're already forgiven, I said, and meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back to the way things were. I wouldn't want to go back, Michael said quickly. I want to go forward. I want to build something new, something honest. Then that's what we'll do, I said. He smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him in years. It transformed his face, made him look like my son again instead of a stranger wearing his skin. Can I ask you something else? He said. I nodded. When you changed those locks, when you sold the furniture, when you decided to take your house back, were you scared? I considered the question, terrified. I admitted. But you know what I realized? I'd been scared for years. Scared of rocking the boat, scared of causing conflict, scared of being seen as the difficult mother-in-law. Fear was making all my decisions anyway, at least this way. I was scared while doing something that mattered to me. Michael laughed, and it was a sound I'd missed more than I'd realized. That's the most badass thing I've ever heard you say. Language, I said automatically, then laughed too. As he got ready to leave, Michael paused at the door. Mom, that card Whitney gave you at Thanksgiving, the one about house sitting, I had no idea she was planning that. If I had known, I would have stopped it. I believed him. The Michael I'd raised would never have intentionally humiliated me like that. The Michael who had let it happen was a man who had lost himself in someone else's version of love. I know, I said, but in a way, I'm grateful she did it. Grateful? I smiled, thinking about everything that had changed since that awful dinner. If she hadn't pushed me that far, I might never have found the courage to push back. After Michael left, I sat in my quiet house, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not the desperate clinging hope that things might somehow get better if I just tried harder to be perfect, but real hope grounded in the knowledge that I had choices, that I had power, that I could shape my own life. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain against my bedroom window. December had arrived with a vengeance, bringing cold air and a steady downpour that turned the yard into a patchwork of puddles. I lay in bed for a moment, listening to the silence of the house, a peaceful silence, not the tense quiet I'd grown accustomed to when trying to avoid Whitney's criticism. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Michael. Meeting with lawyer today. Kids asking about you. Can we come by after school? I texted back a simple yes and got up to start my day. As I made breakfast, I thought about the children. Emma and Jake had been caught in the crossfire of adult battles they couldn't possibly understand. I wanted to shield them from the ugliness of it all, but I also knew they deserved some version of the truth. How do you explain to a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old that their mother had been stealing from their father, that she'd tried to push their grandmother out of her own home, that adult relationships could fracture so completely in the span of a single afternoon? The doorbell rang at 3:45. Through the front window, I could see Michael's car in the driveway and the two small figures racing through the rain toward my porch. I opened the door, and they tumbled in like puppies, all wet hair and backpacks and boundless energy. Grandma Eleanor, Jake wrapped his arms around my waist. Dad said we can visit you whenever we want now. He sure did, I said, hugging him back. And I'm so happy to see you. Emma hung back a little, her eyes taking in the changes to the living room. It looks different, she said cautiously. I did some redecorating. I explained. Do you like it? She touched the soft blue sofa, ran her fingers along the reclaimed wood coffee table. It feels cozier, like a real house and not a magazine. Out of the mouths of babes. Michael stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. Hey, Mom, come in before you catch your death, I said, ushering him inside. There's hot chocolate for the kids and coffee for you. You knew we were coming, Emma said, her face brightening. Of course I did. I'm your grandmother. I'm always prepared. As the children shed their wet coats and boots, Michael pulled me aside. Thank you for this, he whispered. They've been so confused. Whitney won't talk to them about what happened. Just keeps saying she's not feeling well and needs them to be quiet. I nodded, unsurprised. Whitney had never been good at putting the children's needs ahead of her own. While Emma and Jake warmed up with hot chocolate and cookies in the kitchen, Michael and I had a hushed conversation in the hallway. The lawyer says I have a strong case, he told me. The mortgage fraud, the bank statements, it's all documented. Whitney's threats about elder abuse aren't going to hold up. And the children, his face clouded. That's going to be harder. Whitney's parents have already hired their own attorney. They're claiming you're unstable and that I'm under your influence. They want supervised visitation only. I felt a stab of pain at the thought of those two wonderful children caught in this mess. What do you need from me? Just be yourself, Michael said. Let the judge see the woman who raised me, who loves those kids more than anything. The truth will come out. I wasn't so sure. I'd lived long enough to know that truth and justice weren't always on speaking terms. But I nodded anyway, unwilling to add to Michael's burdens. Grandma, Jake called from the kitchen. Can we have more marshmallows? Coming, I called back, glad for the interruption. The rest of the afternoon passed in a bubble of normalcy. I helped Emma with her math homework, the same way I'd helped Michael a lifetime ago. Jake showed me his collection of rocks he'd found at the beach in Aruba, describing each one with scientific precision. We made dinner together, the children manning their stations in the kitchen with serious concentration. It felt like healing, like the beginnings of a new kind of family. As they were getting ready to leave, Emma suddenly asked, "When are we coming home, Dad?" Michael looked at me, then back at his daughter. "We're staying at the hotel for now, sweetheart." "But why?" she persisted. "This is our house." "Actually," I said gently, "this is my house. I've lived here for 43 years, since before your daddy was born." Emma's brow furrowed. "But Mom said it was our house. She said we were letting you stay with us because you're old and need help." I saw Michael wince at his daughter's brutal honesty. Your mom wasn't telling you the truth, I said, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups get confused about what belongs to them and what doesn't. Like when Tyler at school said my unicorn eraser was his, but I had my name on it, Jake piped up. I smiled at the simple wisdom of children. Exactly like that. This house has my name on it. It's where I raised your daddy, and it's where I want to be able to see you both grow up too. So we can still come here, Emma asked, her big eyes anxious. Anytime, I promised. My door is always open to you. Not to Mom, though, she said, and it wasn't a question. I looked at Michael, letting him take the lead. Your mom and I are going through some grown-up problems right now, he explained. We're figuring out how to live apart from each other, and that means making new arrangements for where everyone lives. Are you getting a divorce? Emma asked bluntly. Michael nodded, his eyes sad but resolute. Yes, sweetheart, we are. Good, she said, with such conviction that both Michael and I stared at her in surprise. Mom makes you sad all the time, Dad, and she's mean to Grandma Eleanor when she thinks no one's looking. I felt a rush of emotion grief that this perceptive child had seen so much, and pride that she had the courage to speak her truth. Even if your mom and dad aren't going to be married anymore, I said, they're still your parents, and they both love you very much. Emma looked skeptical but didn't argue. Can we have sleepovers here sometimes? That's up to your dad, I said, looking at Michael. Absolutely, he answered. We'll work that out with the lawyers and the judge. As they drove away, I stood on the porch waving until their taillights disappeared around the corner. The rain had stopped, leaving a clean, washed feeling in the air. A new beginning. That night, my phone rang just as I was getting ready for bed. I didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer anyway. Eleanor Adams. The voice was female, professional, with a slight Southern accent. Yes, this is she. This is Dr. Melissa Winters from Oakview Psychiatric Center. I'm Whitney Adams's attending physician. My hand tightened on the phone. Is everything all right? Mrs. Adams has been admitted for observation following what appears to be a severe anxiety attack. She's asked to speak with you. I sat down on the edge of my bed, surprised. With me, are you sure? She was quite specific. The doctor paused. I should warn you that she's been prescribed medication that might make her a bit unpredictable, but she's been insistent about speaking to you directly. I thought about declining, about protecting my newfound peace from Whitney's manipulations. But something curiosity, perhaps, or just basic human decency made me agree. Put her on, please. There was a rustling sound. Then Whitney's voice came through, smaller and less confident than I'd ever heard it. Eleanor, hello, Whitney. I bet you're happy now, she said, but the words lacked their usual venom. You've won. You've taken everything from me. That wasn't my intention, I said honestly. I just wanted to reclaim what was already mine. She gave a short, bitter laugh. You sound just like my father. This is mine, Whitney. I earned it. You're just living in my house by my good graces. I hadn't expected this glimpse into the wounded person beneath the perfect facade. I'm not your father, Whitney. No, she agreed. You're worse. At least he was honest about his control. You pretended to be this sweet, helpless old lady while you plotted to destroy my marriage. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was a woman in crisis, medicated and desperate. I didn't destroy your marriage. Your actions did that. My actions, her voice rose sharply. I was building a life for us, a future. Do you know what it's like growing up with nothing, Having to smile and pretend while your friends go on vacations and get new clothes and live in houses that aren't falling apart. I do, actually, I said quietly. I grew up poor. Whitney, my father worked in a factory. My mother cleaned houses. Everything I have, I earned through hard work and sacrifice. There was silence on the other end of the line, as if she'd never considered that we might have this in common. The money, she finally said. I wasn't stealing it. I was saving it for Emma and Jake's college fund. In an account only you could access. I needed to protect it, she insisted. Michael would have spent it on new equipment for his company or another ridiculous car. I thought about my son, who drove the same SUV for the past 8 years, who wore watches until they broke, who had paid for Emma's private school tuition without complaint. I don't think that's true, Whitney. You don't know him like I do. I raised him, I reminded her gently. I think I know him pretty well. She started to cry then, soft, broken sobs that sounded like they were being torn from her. What am I supposed to do now? Where am I supposed to go? My parents think I'm a failure. Michael hates me. The kids probably hate me too. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Whitney had created her own disaster, but she was still a human being in pain. No one hates you, Whitney. The children love you. They're confused and hurt, but they love you. And Michael doesn't hate you either. He's disappointed and angry, but those aren't the same as hate. He's going to take them away from me, she whispered. I'll lose my children. Not if you get help, I said firmly. Not if you show that you understand what you did wrong and you're working to change. Why are you telling me this? She asked suspiciously. Why would you help me after what I did to you? I thought about the answer for a moment. Because I'm not interested in revenge, Whitney. I'm interested in healing. For everyone, including you. I don't believe you, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. You don't have to. But think about what I said. Get the help you need. Be honest with the doctors. Do it for Emma and Jake, if not for yourself. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, thinking about the strange turns life takes, how Whitney and I had both been shaped by our pasts, by the fear of not having enough, of not being enough, how differently we'd responded to that fear. I couldn't save Whitney from herself. But maybe, just maybe, I'd planted a seed that might grow into something healthier than bitterness and revenge. The weeks before Christmas passed in a blur of legal meetings, court appearances, and quiet evenings spent decorating the house for the holidays. Michael had been granted temporary custody of the children, with Whitney allowed supervised visits twice a week. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, complicated by the financial deception, but accelerated by Michael's desire to resolve things quickly. Whitney remained at Oakview, gradually moving from inpatient care to a day treatment program. According to Michael, she was actually engaging with therapy, working through the issues that had driven her behavior. I wasn't sure if it was genuine change or just a strategy to gain sympathy from the judge, but I hoped for the children's sake that it was real. I invited Michael and the kids to spend Christmas Eve with me, starting a new tradition. We baked cookies, strung popcorn garlands, and sang carols around the old piano that had been silent for too many years. Emma had inherited my love of music and picked out Silent Night with careful concentration, beaming with pride when we all sang along. As I tucked Jake into bed in what used to be Michael's childhood room, he asked the question I'd been dreading. Grandma, is Mom going to be all alone for Christmas? I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. No, sweetheart. Your mom is spending Christmas with her parents, and you'll see her the day after tomorrow for your special Christmas celebration with her. He nodded, his small face serious. Dad says Mom is sick, but not like with a cold. She's sick in her feelings. Is that true? Yes, I said gently. Sometimes people's feelings can get very tangled up and confused, and they need special doctors to help untangle them. Like when my headphones get all knotted in my backpack. I smiled at his simple analogy. Exactly like that. And just like your headphones, it takes time and patience to work out all the knots. I hope Mom gets better, he said, his eyes already drooping with sleep. She used to laugh more. Before she got tangled up, I kissed his forehead, marveling at the wisdom and compassion of this small boy. I hope so too, Jake. I really do. After the children were asleep, Michael and I sat by the fire, watching the lights twinkle on the Christmas tree. I'd hung all the old ornaments this year, the ones Whitney had deemed too shabby for her designer tree. The handmade star Michael had crafted in second grade, the salt dough candy canes we'd made together when money was tight, the delicate glass bird Thomas had given me on our first Christmas as a married couple. It feels right, Michael said, his voice quiet in the peaceful room. Being here, with you and the kids, it feels like coming home. I reached over and squeezed his hand. It is home. It always has been. I'm thinking of selling the business, he said suddenly, starting something smaller, something that doesn't take so much of my time and energy. Are you sure you've worked so hard to build it? He nodded. That's part of the problem. I've been so focused on success, on providing the kind of life Whitney wanted, that I lost sight of what really matters. I don't want Emma and Jake to grow up with a father who's always working, always stressed, always absent. What would you do instead? I asked. Remember how I used to design video games in college small, independent projects that I loved working on? I smiled, remembering the late nights he'd spend hunched over his computer, explaining his latest creation with such enthusiasm. You were good at that. I've been talking to some old friends from those days. They've started a small studio developing educational games for kids. They need someone with my background in software architecture. His eyes lit up with an excitement I hadn't seen in years. The salary would be less, but after the divorce settlement, I'll have enough saved to make it work. And I'd have regular hours, be home for dinner every night, actually see my kids grow up. It sounds perfect for you, I said sincerely. There's just one problem, he admitted. I'd need to move. The studio is in Portland. My heart sank a little at the thought of them being so far away. Oregon is a beautiful state, I said, trying to sound supportive. Not Portland, Oregon, he clarified quickly. Portland, Maine, about an hour from here. Relief flooded through me. That's practically next door. I was thinking, he hesitated. I was thinking maybe you'd consider moving there too. Not right away, but eventually, when the dust settles. There's a great little arts community, good schools for the kids, and I found this neighborhood of classic New England houses that would remind you of this place. You want me to leave this house? I asked, surprised, after everything that happened to keep it. He shook his head. Not leave it, just consider that home isn't always about the building. It's about the people you share it with. I thought about that as I fell asleep that night, about how fiercely I'd fought for this house, these walls that held so many memories. But Michael was right. A house was just a structure. Home was something deeper, something you carried within you. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke to the sounds of excited children racing down the stairs to see what Santa had brought. As I watched Emma and Jake tear into their presents, their faces alight with joy, I felt a sense of profound gratitude, not just for this moment, but for the courage it had taken to reclaim my life, my dignity, my place in this family. Michael handed me a small, carefully wrapped package. Merry Christmas, Mom. Inside was a delicate silver frame holding a photo I'd never seen before. It showed Thomas and me on our wedding day, standing on the porch of this very house, young and radiant with hope. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "In Dad's old files in the attic. I've been going through them, trying to organize things." He smiled. "There's a whole box of photos Whitney had stored away. I thought you might want them back." I traced the outline of Thomas's face in the photograph, remembering the feel of his hand in mine, the sound of his laugh. "Thank you," I whispered. "This means everything." Later that day, as we sat down to Christmas dinner at my reclaimed dining table, I looked around at the faces I loved most in the world. At Michael, finding his way back to the man he was meant to be. At Emma and Jake, resilient and loving despite the upheaval in their young lives. At the empty chair we'd set for Whitney, a reminder that healing was possible, that forgiveness was a gift we gave ourselves. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I'd like to make a toast." 3 faces turned to me expectantly. "To home," I said simply. "Not just this house, but the feeling of belonging. The knowledge that we're exactly where we're supposed to be, with exactly the people we're supposed to be with." "To home," they echoed, and in that moment, I knew that whatever the future held, whether I stayed in this house or moved to Maine, whether Whitney found her way back to health or not, whether life brought new challenges or unexpected joys, I would face it with the strength and clarity I'd found on that Thanksgiving day when I finally said enough. Spring came early that year, coaxing crocuses from the soil and filling the air with the scent of possibility. I stood in my garden, pruning the rose bushes that had survived Whitney's landscaping plans, feeling the warm April sun on my back. So much had changed in 6 months. Michael's divorce was final, with a custody arrangement that gave Whitney weekends and Wednesday dinners with the children. She'd completed her treatment program and found a job teaching art at a community center, a talent she'd abandoned years ago in pursuit of what she'd thought was a more prestigious life. Michael had sold his company and started his new job in Portland. He'd bought a small craftsman-style house with a backyard perfect for Emma and Jake to play in, and he came back to visit me every other weekend. The sound of a car in the driveway made me look up. A familiar SUV pulled in, and Emma leaped out before it had fully stopped. "Grandma Eleanor," she called, racing toward me. "Guess what I got the lead in the school play?" I set down my pruning shears and opened my arms to her. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What's the play?" "The Wizard of Oz. I'm going to be Dorothy." Jake followed more slowly, carrying a paper bag with careful concentration. "I brought you something, Grandma," he said, presenting it to me with ceremony. "I grew it in my science class." Inside the bag was a small clay pot with a tiny tomato plant just beginning to sprout. "It's a special kind called Early Girl," he explained seriously. "The teacher says they're good for northern gardens because they don't need as much hot weather." "It's perfect," I told him. "We'll plant it in the garden next month, and you can help me take care of it when you visit." Michael approached, looking relaxed in jeans and a casual sweater. The stress lines around his eyes had faded, and he moved with an ease I hadn't seen in years. "Hey, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. "The garden's looking good." "Your father always said spring was for new beginnings," I replied, linking my arm through his as we walked toward the house. "He was right about so many things." As we reached the porch, I noticed a familiar car coming slowly down the street. It parked across the road, and after a moment, Whitney emerged. She stood there, uncertainty written across her face, clutching what looked like a folder to her chest. The children saw her at the same moment. "Mom," Jake called, waving enthusiastically. "Come see my tomato plant." Whitney hesitated, glancing at me with a question in her eyes. I nodded slightly, and she crossed the street to join us on the lawn. She looked different. Her designer clothes had been replaced with simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail rather than an elaborate style. But the biggest change was in her eyes, clearer now, more present, without that sharp edge of anxiety and resentment. "Hello, Eleanor," she said quietly. "I hope I'm not intruding." "You're not," I assured her. "The children are always happy to see you." She knelt to admire Jake's tomato plant and hear about Emma's role in the play, giving them her full attention in a way I'd rarely seen before. When they ran inside to get cookies from the kitchen, she turned to Michael and me. "I wanted to bring this by," she said, holding out the folder. "It's the last of the money from the mortgage account. I've been working with my therapist to make amends, and this is part of that process." Michael took the folder, his expression guarded but not hostile. "Thank you," he said simply. "And I wanted to apologize to you, Eleanor," Whitney continued, meeting my eyes directly. "What I did to you was cruel and inexcusable. I was so caught up in my own insecurities, my own need for control, that I couldn't see the damage I was causing." And I studied her face, looking for signs of the old manipulation, the performative remorse she'd been so good at in the past. But what I saw seemed genuine, a woman humbled by her mistakes, working to rebuild herself into someone better. "We all make choices we regret," I said finally. "The important thing is what we do afterward." "I'm trying," she said, and I believed her. "The kids tell me you might be moving to Portland." I nodded. "I'm considering it. Michael found a lovely little house just a few blocks from his." "That would be good for them," Whitney said, with none of the jealousy or resentment I might have expected. "They love being with you." An awkward silence fell, broken by the sound of the children returning with their cookies. As they chattered excitedly about school and friends and the upcoming play, I watched Whitney with them, still imperfect, still learning, but trying in a way she never had before. We did. Later, after Whitney had left and the children were playing in the yard, Michael joined me on the porch swing. "Do you think she's really changed?" he asked, watching Emma teach Jake how to turn cartwheels in the grass. "I think she's trying," I said. "And that's all any of us can do. Try to be better today than we were yesterday." He nodded, thoughtful. "You know, when I was packing up the old house, I found that card she gave you at Thanksgiving, the one about house-sitting duties. Did you keep it?" I asked, curious. "No," he admitted. "I burned it. It seemed like the right thing to do. End that chapter completely." I smiled, thinking about how far we'd all come since that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find out what truly matters. And what matters to you, Mom, now that you've reclaimed your house, your life. I looked out at my grandchildren playing in the yard of the home I'd fought so hard to keep. At my son, finding his way back to himself after years of being lost. At the garden Thomas and I had planted together, still blooming after all these years. "What matters is this," I said simply. "Family, truth, the courage to stand up for yourself even when it's terrifying, and the wisdom to know when to hold on and when to let go." The porch swing creaked gently as we rocked, the sound as familiar as my own heartbeat. In a few months, I'd put this house on the market and move to Portland to be near Michael and the children. It was time for a new chapter, a new beginning, but I would take with me the strength I'd found here, the clarity that had come from that moment of standing up and saying, "Enough." No house, no matter how beloved, could contain the person I'd become, the woman who had reclaimed not just her property, but her dignity, her voice, her place in the world. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Michael said softly, "for showing me what real courage looks like." I squeezed his hand, my heart full. "I'm proud of us both." In the yard, Emma's laughter floated up like music as she finally mastered a perfect cartwheel. Jake applauded wildly, his face alight with admiration for his sister. The spring sun caught in their hair, turning it to gold, promising long summer days and new adventures ahead. Life wasn't perfect. There would still be challenges, still be difficult conversations and complicated emotions to navigate. But sitting there on my porch, watching my family, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was enough. I had always been enough, and I would never, ever accept less than I deserved again. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.